There are so many beautiful details in this story that preparing the sermon I got so distracted by them I almost forgot to speak about Lazarus. He's quite important in this story. So just so we don't miss the most important thing in this story, the astonishing miracle that Jesus raised Lazarus from death. His power to give new life. It's a sign of his own resurrection, which in fact will be different from Lazarus's. Because in this beautiful, powerful story, what happens to Lazarus? He dies and he comes back to his old life. He will die again. He will be buried again. He will go back into probably this same tomb. It's worth thinking about. And so technically we should call this miracle a miracle of reanimation, coming back to life, or we might say in healthcare terminology, resuscitation. He has been brought back from the dead. A great miracle, undoubtedly. It changed his life. It changed the lives of the people around him. But it's a sign, a foretaste of the far greater miracle that at Easter, Jesus will be raised from the dead to a completely new life. Jesus' resurrection is not just a reanimation. It's being raised to a life completely beyond the power of death. Jesus' body will be glorified, transformed. And we have a foretaste of this in this beautiful story of Lazarus. And just for us to remember as Christians that we do have, because of our faith, a distinctive, a different understanding of death from many people around us. As Christians, we are not afraid of death anymore. It is still a terrifying mystery. It makes us gasp. It's true to say it is a frightening mystery, but we are no longer afraid of it. Because we are very clear about our Christian convictions, and it changes our understanding of death. That Jesus has defeated death, that he will give us a share in his victory if we believe in him and if we share in his Spirit through faith and through baptism. Let me just read what Jesus said to Martha, which we've already heard. I am the resurrection and the life. If anyone believes in me, even though he dies, he will live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? That's Jesus' words to Martha, not mine to you. But it's worth saying again. Do you believe this? We're not naive. There is still a trepidation. Death, as I say, is a terrifying mystery, and it often brings great uncertainty and often great suffering. But we are not afraid. We have the gift of hope for ourselves and for others. How often today death is hidden from us, isn't it? Probably in your own countries, certainly in the UK, you're more likely to die in a hospital than in a home. And interestingly, you're more likely to be buried away from the town, from the church, than in your community. Interesting, I went to bless some rooms in Langton Close, in the student residence there, just near the Brunswick Centre, near Russell Square. And I took a walk through a garden I'd never been through, St George's Gardens. Do you know this, some of you? A lovely hidden garden. And it's got some tombs in it, and the sign there explains this was one of the first cemeteries in London that was not next to the church. And it was for reasons of urbanisation and lack of space. But you see there's a symbolic shift going on here. Death and the dead, part of the community. For most of the Middle Ages and early modern Europe, you were buried next to your church, in your church graveyard, so that when you would have walked into church this morning, if this was a traditional medieval church, You would have come past the graves of your loved ones, praying for them and being held in their prayer in the communion of saints. We've lost some of this, so that death is not a part of life. It's on the edge. It's in the hospital. It's in the out-of-town cemetery. How important it is for us to remember that death, as it were, is part of life and part of our Christian hope, not something we are afraid of. And that even now we share in this. As St. Paul says in the reading today, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, then he who raised Jesus from the dead will give life to your own mortal bodies through his Spirit living in you. This is our gift now. See how fantastic it is. This isn't something we have to wait for. This is our gift now, and it's the gift that will be given to our elect, our catechumens, on Easter Sunday at the gift of their baptism. Okay. So we've got the big point. So now I can just delight in you with one or two details here, because they're very interesting and I hope very helpful. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Jesus loved them. The love of Jesus in the Gospels, and especially in St. John's Gospel here, for individuals. His love is not just a generalised love, which is how we think of it sometimes, I think. I was struck when I visited Bethany, the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, when I visited there in January, that this was a home for Jesus. He loved to come here, not because he had to do good, but because he wanted to be with his friends. This is part of your friendship with Jesus. He is your Saviour and your Lord, but he's your friend, and he delights to be with you. You, with your name in this list. Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus. I won't embarrass you by calling your names out now, but imagine your name, and to remember that his love is personal. But then, almost contradictory here, Jesus didn't go to help them when they asked. Very important detail. Jesus was told, they sent for Jesus, Lord, come and help us. Jesus is in the north, in Galilee. And he stayed 2 days before coming to help. And then he adds a strange line. He says, for your sake, I am glad I was not there, because now you will believe. Do you hear that? For your sake, I am glad that I was not there. It's a strange line, and I've never really heard it before. It shows us something important personally, that Jesus doesn't always come when we ask. He doesn't always do what we ask when we ask him, and that this is part of his mysterious blessing for us. We think often if he doesn't do what we want, or doesn't come into our lives when we ask him, we think of this as a curse, don't we? That he's forgotten us, he's abandoned us. If only we could see it, as in this gospel, as a blessing. Because he has something else planned, something more powerful, that will not only be a blessing, but that will be a blessing that opens up our faith for us, because we've trusted in his work. Just a small throwaway thought, but just go and ponder that strange line. For your sake, I am glad I was not there. Sometimes he delays. Jesus the delayer. Yes, Jesus the deliverer, but sometimes the delayer. And this is part of our faith. And Martha believes. She has such faith in this gospel. The faith of Martha in the intercession of Jesus. Another important point, that Jesus is interceding to the Father for us. And Martha knows this. And so Jesus says to the Father, I thank you for hearing my prayer. And Martha says, I know that whatever you ask of God, he will grant you. Have you said that to the Lord recently? I know that what you ask of the Father, he will grant you. I know. What beautiful faith Martha has, and it's rewarded. Mary, though, she can't summon that faith. All Mary can do is weep. All Mary can do is weep. And that is enough. Do you see again how profound this is? Mary doesn't come with a long list of intercessions. She just brings herself and her brokenness. Her heart is broken. She falls at the ground before Jesus and she weeps. And interestingly, it's the weeping of Mary that causes Jesus to go to the tomb and himself to weep. His response, ultimately, his own human heart being broken by the death of his friend Lazarus, by the intercessions of Martha, and by the raw, unfiltered, emotional honesty of Mary, this is what brings him to the tomb of Lazarus and brings him to step in and pray his prayer of resurrection for Lazarus. Do you see how important Mary is in this? Because often we can't summon the right words. And we're tempted to hide. And how important it is for us always to bring ourselves honestly to the Lord, whatever is going on, and however inarticulate it is. He doesn't always need our clever words or our worked out intercessions and formulas, but he needs the honest truth about who we are and what we're experiencing. That's what Mary shows us today. And finally, just the details here of the miracle. What brings Lazarus out of the tomb? Jesus' words. He shouts, Lazarus, here, come out. The power of Jesus' word to raise Lazarus from death, to give him new life. And how important this is at all times for us, the power of Jesus' word to do God's will and to bring about what is important in our lives. It might not be so loud, but it will always be this powerful. And it's his word that transforms us, not our word. We come with our prayers, but it's Jesus' word that transforms us. The word of the gospel, the word he speaks to us. And it does everything necessary, except, this is my last point, when Lazarus comes out, the last detail of the gospel, he is still bound. He's alive, but he still has the binding of his burial round his hands and his feet and his head. He's given this new life from the Lord, but there is still work to do. And interestingly, Jesus leaves that to other people. He says to the people around him, you unbind him. He's safe, he's free. I've done the hard work, but you unbind him. There's still work to do, and it is our job to do that work. So this is a gospel about the power of Jesus and the importance of faith and trust and honesty and intercession. It's all of that, but just don't forget, however much Jesus is doing for us, there is still work for us to do. We do not become passive. We need to have great faith, great intercession. Jesus will do great things for us, but we still have great things to do for him and for others.